The life you're about to live is that of a tomb raider in ancient Egypt. You were born during the New Kingdom of ancient Egypt, in a stonemason's village on the west bank of the Nile. Your father was a craftsman who built tombs for the pharaohs, chiseling passageways into the rock face of the Valley of the Kings every day. From childhood, you followed your father in and out of the tombs, learning every twist and turn of the passages. He told you these corridors led to the pharaoh's eternal dwelling, filled with gold and treasure. But he also warned you, anyone who touched those things would be cursed by the gods. When you were 13, a falling rock crushed your father's leg during construction, and he never worked again. With no income, your mother and 3 younger sisters survived on nothing but the neighbor's charity. You begged the foreman for work, but he said you were too young. You hauled cargo on the banks of the Nile until your back nearly broke, earning barely a few copper coins a day. Just when despair was closing in, a man from your village named Harry came looking for you. Harry was the village's notorious troublemaker, but he was generous and always flush with coin. He pulled you aside and asked if you wanted to make real money. You said yes. He smiled and said, "Then come with me tonight." That night, you followed Harry and 3 others into the Valley of the Kings under a moonless sky. Harry led you to a crack in the rock hidden behind scrub. You squeezed through and found yourself standing in the corridor of an ancient tomb. Your heart hammered, half terror, half exhilaration. Harry told you not to worry. The owner of this tomb had been dead for centuries, and the gods had long forgotten him. You crept along the corridor for half an hour before finally reaching the burial chamber. The moment the torchlight flooded the chamber, you stood paralyzed. Glittering burial goods filled the room. Golden thrones, golden goblets, jewel-encrusted necklaces, exquisite alabaster jars. You had never seen so much wealth in your life. Harry told you not to be greedy. Take only the small pieces you could carry. You stuffed a handful of golden amulets and a turquoise necklace into your waist pouch. Your hands were trembling, and you couldn't tell whether it was from nerves or from thrill. That first haul was enough to feed your family for half a year. You brought the gold to Harry's fence, who bought it at 30% of market value. A steep cut, but to you it was a fortune beyond imagining. You bought grain and new clothes for the family. When your mother asked where the money came from, you told her you'd been hired for labor. From that day on, you became a permanent member of Harry's crew. Your edge was the tomb knowledge your father had taught you since childhood. You could spot which stones had been sealed later, which passages might lead to hidden chambers. Harry called you Little Hawkeye. At 17, you took part in your biggest operation yet. You dug for 3 solid months, tunneling straight into the depths of a high official's tomb. The take from that job gave every man enough wealth to last a lifetime. But wealth brought danger. Some in your crew started flaunting their riches, spending lavishly at the marketplace. The inspectors of Medina began to notice that a gang of poor stonemasons had suddenly become wealthier than nobles. When you were 20, disaster struck. Inspectors raided Harry's house without warning and found several items that were unmistakably burial goods. Harry was arrested and beaten within an inch of his life. But he never gave up a single name. He bit off his own tongue in prison and died. Harry's death haunted you for a long time. You swore you'd never do it again. You found honest work as a temple laborer and lived 2 quiet years. But when the money ran out, the old itch proved impossible to resist. This time you assembled your own crew. Just 3 men you trusted with your life. You laid down iron rules. No flaunting wealth. No reckless spending, and after every job the loot stayed hidden for at least 6 months before being sold. You became more cautious and cunning than Harry ever was. The 5 years from 25 to 30 were your most reckless era. You led raids on over a dozen tombs, from minor officials' graves to a queen's satellite burial. Nothing was off limits. Your technique grew ever more refined. You even invented a method of soaking rock with water to speed up excavation. You secretly bought a respectable house on the east bank of the Nile and married a weaver's daughter. She never knew your real profession. She believed you traded in stone. Every time you left home, you told her you were off to buy stock. In truth, you were heading for the Valley of the Kings. At 32, you faced your greatest challenge. Someone told you about a pharaoh's tomb deep in the valley that had never been breached. Its burial goods were said to be beyond price. But the site was heavily guarded, and rumors spoke of lethal traps within. You spent an entire year preparing. You bribed a guard and obtained a rough layout of the tomb. Then you led your crew into an abandoned mine shaft 100 meters away and began digging, inch by inch, toward the pharaoh's resting place. The moment the tunnel finally broke through, you pushed aside the ceiling slab and beheld a sight you would never forget. The entire chamber blazed with gold. A pure gold death mask covered the sarcophagus at its center, and treasures of unimaginable artistry lined every wall. You spent 3 nights inside the tomb, smuggling out the most valuable pieces in shifts. The golden mask was too heavy and too conspicuous, so you left it. But what you carried out was more than enough to keep you all comfortable for the rest of your lives. What you didn't know was that after the guard you'd bribed was transferred, his replacement noticed something wrong. 6 months later, the pharaoh's vizier launched a massive investigation. Every village near the Valley of the Kings was turned upside down. One of your crew cracked under pressure and confessed. On a morning in your 35th year, as you sat eating breakfast in your courtyard, more than 20 soldiers smashed through the door. As you were forced face down to the ground, your wife screamed in horror. She finally knew what you had been doing all these years. You were dragged before the vizier for trial. They beat you with rods to force a full confession. You took 100 blows. The flesh on your back was torn to ribbons, but you only admitted to a few insignificant minor tombs. The secret of the pharaoh's tomb, you guarded even as you ground your teeth to dust. Without enough evidence for a death sentence, they cut off your nose and ears as punishment, then exiled you to the copper mines of Nubia for hard labor. There, under the merciless sun, you broke rock day after day, an existence barely distinguishable from death. 3 years later, a plague swept through the mines and killed most of the guards. You seized the chaos and escaped, walking north for a full month until you reached the Nile once more. But you could never go home. The scars on your face were proof of who you were. You settled in a fishing village under a false name, earning your living from the river. One night when you were 43, you sat by the Nile, gazing across at the silhouette of the Valley of the Kings. You thought of those glittering chambers, of Harry, of your wife and children. In this life, you rose from a poor stonemason's son to the most formidable tomb raider the Valley of the Kings had ever known, then plummeted from the heights into the deepest abyss. You cracked open a pharaoh's tomb, seized treasures that were never yours to take, and paid a price you never saw coming. This has been your life simulation, the life of an ancient Egyptian tomb raider.